Hello, everyone. Rhea and I are excited to start chapter 13 today. Chapter 13 is titled Initiating Change. So I'm going to start off with a story today about a leader. When I was a lean manufacturing manager in a facility, and I was trying to get other managers actually to, take initiative and start the lean transformation in their own departments. And there was a quality manager, and he was always busy. I mean, everybody's always busy, right? Who ain't always busy when they're at work, especially in a manufacturing environment, high productivity and all that sort of stuff. So anyway, he always said he just didn't have time. He didn't have time to do all the things I was asking. One of the things I was asking him was, we had a quality lab out inside of the plant, and it kind of had like a simulated wood grain siding on the walls and on the interior and exterior. Although the building was on the inside of the plant, the interior and the exterior of the walls were brown and looked like, wood grain. So part of our initiative was we were painting everything bright white, brighten up the place. And we wanted, part of our lean initiative was paint that building white, inside and out. That quality manager told me for months and months and months, he just didn't have time. They were too busy. And he provided the evidence to support the belief. 6 months after asking, it still hadn't been painted. And ended up, he resigned, and the plant manager asked me to become the quality manager and the lean manager. And I didn't really want to do that, but I did it. And so I took over the quality team. The first thing I did was I brought the lean team together and the quality team together. And I said, we've got to focus on quality because we had major quality issues. So all of us, we're going to get together, focus on quality. It was pretty neat. Something happened. I think it was the first day or the very next day. One of the quality technicians came up and asked me, one way we could improve quality, and it relates to lean, Mack. She said we could get a nice big flat screen to put on the wall inside the quality lab. And I already knew that was a nice idea. That was a great idea. And it was her idea. So it was a way to, as a new leader of that department, to build trust and that sort of thing with the people. And I knew I didn't have a problem getting it. But what I told her was, I said, you remember we've been trying to get this quality lab painted white. That's a lean thing, but it's also part of the quality project. And she was like, yep. I said, make a deal with you. Soon as those walls are white on the outside and the inside, and the floor is painted high gloss gray, like we've been talking about for months. Soon as that's done, I'll let you. You can come in here to my office. I'll pull up whatever website, and you can order the TV that you want. Put it on the wall. She said, okay, that's a deal. And so remember, I'm talking about initiating change. And remember, the manager of that department, 6 months, I've been trying to get him to do that. He couldn't do it, didn't have time. The very next day, basically less than 24 hours later, next day I'm at work. As soon as I get there, this lady, this quality technician comes into my office, and she says, come out here, Mack, I want to show you something. So I really didn't know what she was wanting to show me. I figured it was a quality issue or something like that. She's like, come out to the lab, I want to show you something. So I follow her out there. We open the door, walk into the plant, and to my amazement, here's a white quality lab sitting in the middle of the plant. White on the inside, white on the outside, and the floor was high gloss gray. And I said, how did y'all do that so fast? She said, oh, we didn't do it. We asked the third shift maintenance people to do it for us. So what was cool about that was what the quality manager couldn't do in 6 months, she did in 24 hours. All she needed was motivation and inspiration to do it. I created a win-win situation. What I was doing was I was initiating change with my new team, but what she was doing was initiating real change out on the shop floor in her department and in her space. She wanted the TV. That was her win. I wanted the place white. That was my win, and the plant's win, because when customers came in, the place looked nicer and neater and a better work environment. But she got to work on initiating change when she left out of my office. She figured out a way to do it, and they had enough influence with the night shift that It was pretty amazing. I'm still blown away that they were able to do that. I mean, that was a really neat story, real.
Not only did she initiate change, she had the influence to initiate change. And that's kind of the, something we talk about in the book is that initiating change requires a higher level of emotional intelligence, right? And part of our emotional intelligence is the ability to develop our skills relative to influencing other people. And she had it, right? She knew it was important. She was on it. It was a priority. But not only that, she had the emotional intelligence and the leadership skills to go influence somebody else whose job it wasn't even to do it, and to do it so quickly. It was just like, bam, the next day it's done. And that's amazing. It's incredible.
Yeah, that was pretty neat. And I don't know, Rhea, I just noticed I got this new camera that we're working with, and I couldn't hear you through my headset. I didn't realize I had my headset on, my microphone was working, but you started speaking. So I realized I wasn't hearing you through my headset. So I don't know if that's going to sound funny when you were talking because my mic may pick up the speakers from the computer. I don't know. You want to continue on? You think it's all right? Does it sound?
I think it'll be okay. We'll give it a shot.
I don't know. All right. You want to dive into today's lesson?
Yeah, well, just kind of talking about what we started off of, that initiating change does require a higher level of emotional intelligence. And initiating change, kind of like we've been saying throughout this podcast series, requires us to be proactive. It requires you to say I will instead of I hope or I wish or I would like it to. I love a quote I was reading just this morning. I came across a great quote about change from Jim Rohn. He says, "We generally change ourselves for one of two reasons: inspiration or desperation."
Ah,
And I love that because really, when it comes to initiating change, I think that that's especially important, right? Absolutely, we all have to deal with changes at work, professionally. The world's changing, software's changing, the way we do business is changing. The way we have meetings has changed this year so much, right? So there's no doubt about that. But I think that initiating change is probably it probably comes a little easier in that environment, in a professional environment, because most most of us, we might not like change. We might drag our heels and go kicking and screaming in through the changes, but at the end of the day, most of us will change because we want the paycheck, and we know ultimately it's change or be changed, right? We talked about that. So the majority of people, I think, will get there. But I think on a personal level, initiating change is incredibly difficult because we're human. We like the status quo. And, whether we're talking about our physical health and making a change there, or changing our habits, or changing our mindset, right? Or maybe letting go of beliefs that have held us back in the past, habits that have held us back in the past, whatever it is that we probably know we should change, initiating that change and getting that going, it really does come down to, sometimes it's just desperation, right? Sometimes we're pushed up against a wall and we don't really have a choice. It's like the consequences are going to be too great. And so sometimes that's the only way that we're willing to initiate change. So it really does take just a higher level of proactivity on an individual level. And I think that that's magnified for those who are in leadership positions, right? As your story points out, you were trying to get everybody else on board with what needed to happen and painting the department white. So you had to initiate the change not only for yourself, but have to have that influence to be able to inspire others to take the initiative, to be proactive. And yeah, I think leadership, when you're in a leadership formal level of position, I know we all have influence, but when you're in a formal position of authority, I think that there's kind of like a magnifying glass, right? And it's kind of like everybody is watching, but you're under that magnifying glass, and your words, actions, and how you're behaving is really um, shown, even more so. There again, a magnifying glass makes everything bigger. And I think as leaders, it's important to realize that.
yeah. And what you're talking about, that's what I had to do. I had to influence my peers. that manager didn't report to me. He reported to the plant manager, but he didn't report to me. So I'm trying to initiate change through someone who doesn't report to me. And that person basically just put up the roadblock. He didn't even go to his team and ask them. So, that's one thing. Another big thing, and you and I see it a lot today, relative to leadership development. We go into companies, we're trying to help them transform the company, whatever company that may be. They're all over the country that we support. And it's a recurring theme. We go in and we start teaching all this stuff, and we start talking about book studies. And most often, no one really wants to initiate change. They want to come to the training sessions and sit in there and listen to us, because they don't have to do nothing like that. We had to do it all. We gotta talk and present, and they come sit there and listen. And we'll come back next time. We'll talk about it, and we may ask, who's been doing a book study? Nobody's doing a book study, because they got to initiate change, and it takes courage to do that, especially when it's a transformation of culture. A lot of people don't want to be the first to follow. Talk about the first follower relative to initiating change, Rhea. Talk about, kind of how that sequence happens.
Yeah, well, I can touch on that a little bit and let you kind of dig into it. Really, it's interesting because you and I talk about this when we're maybe watching a movie or something, and a lot of times in a movie there's that inspirational leader who has a vision and they, want to save the world or come up with a solution or, fight the battle or whatever it is, right? There's that leader that steps out and casts the vision. But what often determines how quickly people will jump on board and follow that leader is the first follower, right? The first follower's got to be the one that's brave. I mean, you have to be brave and have courage to be the leader to step out and cast the vision, but you have to have courage to be the first follower, right? Because what happens a lot of times in the movie, that first follower says, okay, I'm on board with whatever. I'm going to follow you. And that's the person that influences the second and the third. And then the rest of them jump on board without any thought at that point, right? So it's the first follower that's of critical importance. And, from a leadership perspective, I think this is where the power of, I think it's Covey who calls it the meeting before the meeting, right? And realizing that there are people in the organization on the team that have influence that aren't in formal levels of positions of authority. And our part of our leadership role is to make sure that we're influencing them and getting their buy-in in key areas and key ways. And a lot of that can really be accelerated when we make sure that we, meet with them one-on-one. Before we have that big meeting and cast the vision, are we making sure those first followers or first potential followers are on board? Are we increasing our influence with the people who have influence, right? Because from a leadership perspective, that's where the key growth and key buy-in for the team members is going to come. Not just us as the leader, although that's a big part of it, but also those other people who have influence in the organization, because they're using it either positively to help us fight or negatively to fight against us.
Yeah, we talked about that previously about resisting change, but yeah, what you were talking about with the first follower, I mean, they really become the leader,
Mm.
because without a first follower, nothing happens. So
That's right.
so the first follower comes, and the original leader thinks, "Oh, look at me," after everything starts rolling. But it's not the original leader; it's the first follower who actually becomes the leader, whether they
Hmm.
know it or not. They kind of send the signal that it's okay to follow, and they lead the way. So that's a pretty critical piece. Another thing that I do a lot of when we go out and we're helping companies transform teams is I start kind of mentoring those people who are initiating change in their company. But most of the time, those people reach out to me and they want to talk to me, and they may reach out through social media or something. But I get on the phone with them, and then I end up, if they're serious about initiating change, I end up mentoring them for free. My client don't. Sometimes the people who hired me does not even know I'm doing that. But what I'm trying to do is actually facilitate the change happening in the organization. Somebody has to lead those people who actually want to transform. And most of the time, the leaders of the companies are not prepared to lead. A lot of them have never heard this kind of stuff. They're more than well equipped to manage people, through change, but they're not ready to lead people through change. So that's something that I do, and I'm sure you probably do it as well when the opportunity presents itself. But I know a lot of people reach out to me, and I want us to get positive results when we're in the company, and those people are seeking leadership. So if we don't lead them, they may end up kind of regressing and going back where they come from.
Mm. You know, we talk about a lot of times that when you initiate change, you're taking responsibility, right? Because when you're initiating it, you're taking ownership of it, responsibility for the success of it. And that's a whole nother level of of burden, right, to carry. And yet it's so critical because, like we said, there is no such thing as status quo, whether we're talking about personally or professionally. Status quo is a myth. Nothing stays the same in life. You're either going forward and making progress or going backward, right? And losing that momentum. And so that's why it's so critical. You know, we spend a lot of time talking about the principles relative to leading yourself and others through change, but the reason it's so critical is because change is happening. It's going to happen. It's always happened. It's going to keep happening. The only question is, are we, getting ahead of it? Are we embracing it? Are we initiating it? Are we leveraging it? Because we might find ourselves that if we're unwilling to change, we might be the ones who are changed.
That's absolutely true. So I'm going to talk about 3 levels of change initiation. What do you think
Uh,
about that, Ria?
I think that'd be great. Lay it on us.
So I want to read a quote from our friend and mentor Jimmy Collins, the uh, former president and chief operating officer at Chick-fil-A. Y'all have heard me talk about Jimmy Collins a lot probably before, but this is a quote from Jimmy. He says, "Responsibility and roles are not something that must be handed down. They are taken as one assumes more and more responsibility in the organization." So it kind of spins off of what you were just talking about, responsibility. But Jimmy talks about not accepting responsibility. When somebody gives you responsibility and then you accept that responsibility, he's talking about it. The reason I put that quote here, and I talk about it a lot, and you just mentioned it, but taking responsibility, no one may be giving you responsibility. You're just taking responsibility. And that's what we're always looking for when we go into organizations. Who wants to take responsibility for leading this charge? We always wish it would be the top leader, but unfortunately, we both know from a lot of experience, a lot of times it's not the top leader. It's someone else. Could be a frontline leader, could be an entry level person. But I want to talk about the 3 levels of change initiation. And this is relative to anything. But remember, my background's process improvement, lean manufacturing, that sort of stuff. So I want to talk about these 3 levels just kind of relative to problem solving, because that's to solve a problem, something's got to change. If nothing changes, you continue to have the problem. So there's all types of problems, endless number of problems in the workspace. But level 1 is to identify a problem. And I would say maybe I should have called this the 4 levels. And level 1 is like no initiation. You you either don't even understand there's a problem or you don't care that there's a problem. But I didn't list that as one of the 3. But there's a lot of people out there who just ignore the problem. So we're going to start at level 1 is identify the problem. And identifying the problem means you at least acknowledge the problem, and then maybe you go to your boss and let them know there's a problem. But the whole reason this is level 1 is you expect someone else to solve the problem. You think that's somebody else's job. I mean, I've heard people in plants and companies say, they don't pay me to think. That those kind of people will identify the problem and tell the boss, but they don't want to get involved in any kind of solution or problem solving. So, that's the leader
Hmm.
must still solve the problem. So that leader can't count on you. It's better than someone who ignores the problem, doesn't even report the problem, but that leader is counting on the people the most who can help solve problems. So level 2 is identify the problem and provide a solution. So now I see a problem, but I don't just go tell the leader, hey, we've got a problem. I may look at it and think about it, come up with a solution or 2 or 3 solutions, or I may talk to a coworker, involve somebody else. I may call out engineering or whoever, doesn't matter. I may just get someone else so I can get a couple of different people thinking about the problem. So then when I go to the leader, they kind of see me as a high level leader because I'm trying to help the leader. So when I say, hey, we got this problem, but I talked to X, Y, and Z, and we all came up with a solution. We think this will work. This is one we want to go with, but if this doesn't work, we got a couple of other solutions. Then all the leader has to do is say make it happen, or either override you, but at least they know you're thinking and they know you're trying to be engaged at a higher level. Because people who can solve problems, identify problems, solve problems, they bring a lot of value to leaders and to
Mm.
organizations.
And then they become more valuable.
Absolutely. That's the critical piece. As you're trying to grow and increase your influence for yourself, that's what you want to do. You don't want to focus on becoming successful, focus on becoming valuable. So level 3 relative to change initiation is to identify a problem and solve the problem. So you identify it, you come up with a solution, and then you solve the problem. And then later you see the leader passing by and you say, "Hey boss, we had this problem earlier. Either me or myself and a team or whoever you want to give the credit to, we figured out what to do about it. This is what we done. Everything's fine. Just want to let you know that it happened." The boss thinks that's great. They continue on. You continue on, and you're not telling them just to toot your own horn to get credit. You're telling the boss because you want the boss to know that you're taking responsibility, that you know how to think, that maybe you're leading a team of people, that you're pulling people together to solve problems without anyone telling you. Because down the road, there's going to be opportunities where they need people like that to get promoted into other positions. It may be within your own department, it may be another department. So the reason you're telling the boss or the engineering people, support people, whoever it is you need to tell related to that problem, the reason you're telling them is so that they can learn you take responsibility, you take action, and you think on your feet, and you're part of the team. You're a problem solver. You're not a part of the problem any longer. Now you're a part of the solution.
Hmm. As you're saying all that, we come back again and again to how important it is to, number one, be proactive. But part of that being proactive is developing ourselves and equipping ourselves so that we are more valuable, so that we have solutions, so that we have improved our ability to think and to think critically and improve the quality of our thinking. I love the quote that we included in this chapter that says, by James Allen, it says, "We are anxious to improve our circumstances, but unwilling to improve ourselves. We therefore remain bound." Right. And I see that repeated over and over again. Almost every single one of us universally want our circumstances to get better, right? That's human. We want more money. We want a great career. We want more influence. We want more options, more opportunities. We want better health. Yeah. But how many of us are willing to improve ourselves to get what we want? And until we're willing to do that, right? Until we're willing to be the change, quite literally, it's really difficult or almost impossible to be successful in that endeavor.
Absolutely. And what we're talking about is initiating change, right? I mean, in our own life, in our own lives, from a personal standpoint. I mean, no boss made me go to college when I decided to go to college. I was tired of my life being the way it was. And at that point in my life, I was tired of working the night shift.
And then
And
improved your circumstances, though, didn't it?
yeah, I mean, got raises. I got raises. I got promotions. I got to get on the first shift so I could go watch my son play baseball and football and all those things I was missing. And it led to all other types of things. But the number one thing that caused me to do it was I wanted to be, at home in my son's life so I could experience all the things that he was doing in the evenings instead of me being at work from 3 o'clock in the afternoon till midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning or something like that, basically missing everything. So I didn't see any other way out except go to school, initiate change in my life. And it didn't take long. I didn't have to graduate before I started getting the benefits. Just as soon as I started going to school, I mean, I started getting opportunities for raises and promotions, and I got on first shift before I ever graduated anything. I got a 2-year degree and then a 4-year degree, but I got a promotion to first shift before I ever even got the 2-year degree. But, people just knew I was taking initiative and that I was growing. And I mean, it started with that, initiating change. We meet a lot of people in the world, in the United States, that as we travel around and through social media, all kind of ways we meet people and they're miserable.
Mm.
And all they have to do is initiate change, take action, take responsibility, and they can watch that being miserable. You remember that movie Real Sixth Sense where the little boy sees dead people?
I do.
I always like to tell people I see miserable people. They're all over the world. They're all over the place. We see them all the time. And the sad thing is, a lot of them don't even know they're miserable. A lot of
Mm,
them do know they're miserable, but a lot of them don't even know it anymore. They've become so accustomed to that's the way life is. They think they can't change it.
yeah, maybe just settling for less than what is possible. That's the sad thing, is because more and better is possible, right? But sometimes a lot of times what we get is what we're willing to settle for. In fact, I'd say most times what we get is what we're willing to settle for.
That's good. I'm gonna wrap this one up with a quote you reminded me of. I say it a lot. I wrote it in my book, Defining Influence, but it fits right here. You just provoked that thought. But I always say, too often in life, people who are searching find what they'll settle for and stop looking for what they were searching for.
Mm,
So many people settle. They settle on a lot of things. They're searching. As soon as they find something they'll settle for, they stop searching. They settle on a job. They settle on a house. They settle on a spouse. They settle on all kinds of things. So we're going to wrap up chapter 13, and we'll be back next week, and we'll be talking about chapter 14, becoming a change champion. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Talk to you
talk
next
to you
time.
next time. Today's podcast episode is one of a series of podcast episodes I recorded with my husband, Mack Story, on a book that we co-wrote together, Change Happens: Leading Yourself and Others Through Change. I know you'll enjoy the leadership principles that Mack brings to the Fearfully and Wonderfully Me podcast, so be sure to follow Mack on social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, or Twitter at Mack Story, or subscribe to the Blue Collar Leadership podcast for more on the leadership principles that Mack teaches.